welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be going through my mid-year recap and see what books I have read in the first 6 months of 2025. The first 6 months of 2025 have actually been pretty bad for me reading-wise. I've had a really big reading slump for the past 6 or so months. At the beginning of 2025, I actually finished reading Harry Potter through for the first time ever. I feel like the books were so intense and so emotional that it just took a lot out of me to finish reading them, and I feel like I'm still struggling now to actually get back into the routine of reading. But as the year goes on, I'm getting back into it and I'm reading more and I'm enjoying it again. First off, let's discuss my stats. So far, unfortunately, I've only read 16 books this year, which is very low for me. At the point of recording, I'm in week 26, and typically I would have read around 26 books by now. So being at 16 is a little bit underwhelming, but we make do. Though on top of that, I have actually DNF'd one book, but we'll get into that later. Of the 16 books that I read, 3 were fantasy books, 9 were romances, and 3 were mysteries. It is abundantly clear I have some preferences when it comes to genres. Alright, let's get into the first book. The first book that I finished this year was The Half-Blood Prince. As I said, these books were intense to get through, especially with some of them being so large. However, this one felt like a bit of fresh air after reading Order of the Phoenix. I struggled so much to get through Order of the Phoenix. It was so long and so boring. So once I got to this book, it had a little bit more plot to it and it made it a lot more enjoyable to read. I won't give any spoilers, but basically this is Harry Potter and his friends' 6th year at Hogwarts, and the secrets and the mysteries just keep piling up, and they have to figure out what is going on and what they're going to do. And what happens is Dumbledore is basically training Harry in order to defeat Voldemort. Also, can we just take a moment to look at how beautiful the covers of these books are? In the end, I ended up rating The Half-Blood Prince a 4 out of 5 stars. I also forgot to preface that a lot of the books that I have read this year have actually been on my Kindle, because when I have been in a reading mood, picking up a physical book has felt a little bit daunting. So reading on my Kindle has made it a little bit more accessible and easy to read. I also happened to read a few Christmas books throughout January because I didn't finish as many of the Christmas books I wanted to over the Christmas period, and it didn't feel too weird for me to read them in January. It felt very lovely. It felt like I was just extending the Christmas joy for a little bit longer. The next book that I read was Holiday Hostilities by Katie Bailey. Okay, so basically this is a hockey romance, which we all love right now. So basically in this book, we have the main character, Olivia, and she has known this man, Aaron, since they were teenagers. He is her brother's best friend, and he is a hockey player. They hate each other, and they've hated each other since they were kids. However, when he finds out she's going to be staying at her apartment with her crazy roommates for the holidays, he offers to let her stay at his apartment with him. The only thing she has to do for him is be his date to the Christmas gala. Of course, I'm sure we all know how this goes, but it was actually really enjoyable to read, and it didn't feel too much like a Christmas book. It just felt like it took place over the Christmas period, so it was very easy to read in January. In the end, I rated this book a 4 stars. What I loved about this book was the whole grumpy sunshine trope. It is very popular right now, but it's something that I really love, especially when the girl is more on the grumpy side and the guy is more on the sunshine side. I just love it. It makes me feel all giddy and happy, and I giggled a lot throughout this book. The next book that I read was This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. Alright, in this book, the female main character, Lucy, runs into this man, Felix, when she's on holiday at her friend's beach house. They end up hooking up, but it turns out that Felix is her best friend's little brother. So Lucy decides that they cannot see each other. And then every summer, Lucy comes to her friend's beach house again, and they continue to see each other, and the tension continues to grow. A week before her wedding, her friend flees to the beach house unexpectedly, and Lucy has to follow her to figure out what is wrong. Of course, Felix is there, and everything comes to a boiling point. While I did love the book, one of my least favourite things in a romance is when they have a million reasons why they shouldn't be together, because a lot of the time they just feel a little bit mundane and a little bit silly. In the end, I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I will say, as a first-time reader of Harry Potter, this book was magnificent. My husband's little brother is obsessed with Harry Potter and he reads these all the time. And he told me that this book is actually quite boring, at least for the first half. But I felt like it was so exciting. I loved finding out all of the new information, even when they were on the run and they were just doing the same thing pretty much every day. I felt like we were constantly learning things and there was always something happening, even if it wasn't crazy and grand. It felt like big things were happening and the build up was really fun. I will say that as someone who has heard so many things about Harry Potter over the years, of course, I do feel like the final scene, the final battle was over a little bit quickly. It felt like it was just all of a sudden done. It just felt like it was just all of a sudden it was happening and it was over. I also didn't really like the epilogue. I felt like it was just too simple. I feel like it could have been a different scene. While I love the idea that we got to see Harry and his family, which is something he has always wanted, it felt like it was too simplified and it was too romantic. Basically, it was too perfect. Despite that, I actually did give this 5 stars because it was just a phenomenal read and I loved everything that we learnt, and I can't wait to reread this again because I am in the middle of rereading this series because I can't help myself. Following along from me reading random Christmas books, I read Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret by Benjamin Stevenson. Now, I really love Benjamin Stevenson's other books. In particular, Everybody on This Train is a Suspect. I adored that book and I thought that it was absolutely phenomenal. I've never read a book in the style that Benjamin Stevenson writes, and it just keeps me captivated. I can't put them down. I read most of his books in just a day or two because I can't stop reading them. How this book is set out as well is as an advent calendar. Each chapter gives you a little bit of a clue as to how the book ends, and by chapter 25 you are meant to kind of figure out what happens. To be honest, I'm not the type of mystery reader that tries to actively figure out what's happening. I like to just go with the flow and then in the end have it all put together and I figure it out then in the moment. Otherwise, I just feel like, what's the point of reading it? I may as well just go to the end and see how it ends. So I felt like this was a really fun way to do it. It was very short, very quick, very sweet, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for some Christmas reads in a few months' time. In the end, I rated this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Hate at First Sight by Lizzie O'Hagan. I don't have the book with me and it's not on my Kindle because this was actually a library book. So this is actually a workplace romance where she hates the male main character at first sight and then ends up having to work with him in order to save her job. As I'm sure most of you are, I love an enemies to lovers romance trope. It just keeps me hooked. I can't stop reading. I love it. I love how you know that they're most likely going to end up together in the end. And you just see these little points of them starting to like each other and starting to figure out their feelings and seeing a different side to this person than they originally saw. And it was very fun with this particular book. Despite this, I felt like the romance was a bit of a subplot in the story. The main story was centered around her work and trying to figure out who she is. While this isn't bad, I did go in expecting it to be a romance, and I wanted a little bit more focus on that enemies to lovers build up. So in the end, I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5 stars. I reread this book at least once per year. It's one of my all-time favorites. I'd say I've read it 4 or 5 times now. I can't seem to let go of these characters. The way that Casey McQuinton has written them and the storyline is just so beautiful. So basically, this book is about the President of the United States' son and the Prince of England. Originally, they hate each other, or one of them in particular hates the other. Basically, the son of the President of the United States, Alex, goes to London to go to the Prince's wedding. While there, we find out that Alex has a bit of beef, a bit of history with the other prince, Henry, and it ends up in a scandal. For damage control, London and Washington devise a plan where they are going to tell the media that Alex and Henry are best friends and they have to act the part. Eventually, they are hurtling into a secret romance. It's traveling the globe to see each other, it's cancelling plans, it's hidden alcoves. I truly adore it. Despite it just being an overall good romance and a good book, I feel like it brings up a lot of good questions about politics and human rights. It shows how people need to gain a lot of courage to be able to be who they are, especially when they're in the limelight. I truly can't recommend this enough, and every single time I read it, I will continue to rate it 5 stars. The next book that I read was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and this started an obsession for me. My cousin actually recommended this book to me when I was asking her what I should read, and I can't thank her enough. I have become a true fangirl of Abby Jimenez. Part of Your World is about a friends with benefits situation that ends into a whirlwind of a romance that completely transforms the female main character's life for the best. I'm a big fan of romance, and there's not often that I will rate them very low because I feel like my expectations are pretty low. I just want some good old-fashioned romance. I want to giggle, I want to laugh, I want to feel all lovey-dovey and warm inside, and there's not much authors have to do to get me to that point. But there's something about Abby Jimenez's work that I feel like just exceeds those expectations. This is truly one of the best romances I've read, in my opinion, and I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was, of course, Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, the next book in the Part of Your World series. This follows the story of the best friend of the previous main character and her budding relationship with her colleague who has just started at the hospital. At the beginning, there is a big miscommunication between the two, whereas typically I don't really like the miscommunication trope. I actually feel like Abby Jimenez worked it really well into the story and didn't make it feel like it was just a stereotypical trope in a romance book or a typical plot device to help the story keep going. I feel like most of the time, authors will use miscommunication as a way to drive the plot forward by creating drama, but I felt like this one actually helped just move the story forward and bring out new layers of their relationship and new layers of their own personalities that they didn't know before, that really built up their characters. I feel like it was a really great plot device in this situation. Once again, I rated this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I was on a roll at this point. I couldn't stop there. I had to read just for the summer the 3rd installment in the Part of Your World series. I will say, I think this is actually one of my favorites. It starts with a Reddit thread where the male main character tells this story about how every time he's in a relationship, his ex ends up finding the love of their life. The female main character sees this Reddit thread and is like, oh my god, this happens to me too. And she messages him and they become great friends immediately. They start talking every day on the phone. And this male main character, I feel like it's just one of the best written men I have ever seen. The amount of romance and just the little things that this man does just astounds me. And I was constantly giggling and kicking my feet, and I devoured this book. If I could rate this book more than 5 stars, I would, but in the end, of course, I had to rate it 5 out of 5 stars. After reading those romances, I felt like I needed a little bit of a break, even though I love romances a lot. And so I decided to start the Harry Potter series again. I know I've already talked about the 2 last books in this series, but if you don't know Harry Potter, it basically tells the story of this 11-year-old kid who is living at his aunt and uncle's house because his parents died when he was just around 1 year old. And he finds out that he's a wizard, and we get the story of him going to his first year at Hogwarts, a wizarding school that is just amazing and wonderful, and he has the time of his life. But it seems like there is something going on in the school and he can't help but try and figure out the mystery. I love the first book in this series. It is very nostalgic and it just feels like a warm hug. It's not the most exciting book in the series, it's not the most dramatic book in the series, but despite this, I feel like it's just a really good book to read every now and then if you're feeling a little sick or if the weather's cold, which it is in Australia right now. It is really nice to sit back under a blanket with a cup of tea and get stuck into this book. On this reread, I rated this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I followed up by reading Chamber of Secrets. Now, although I was very excited to get back into this series, I feel like this book kind of put me back in the slump for a little bit because I feel like it's one of my least favourite books in this series, and I hope people aren't going to get mad about that. I love the fact that we get Dobby. Don't love Lockhart. I find his character to be very annoying. I understand why he's there. His character just irks me a lot, and if I can just skip over this book, I would, but I'm not the type of person that can skip a book in a series. I have to read them all. In the end, I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5 stars. Next was actually my DNF, which was The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. I got about 30% of the way through this book, and I wasn't hating it, but I just wasn't drawn to it. I felt like it was taking a long time to properly get into the plot. It was constantly switching characters. I kept forgetting which character was which. It also kept jumping through time. It'd be in the future, it'd be in the past, it'd be in the present, and I just couldn't quite wrap my head around it. So in the end, after trying to read it for about a month, I just decided to DNF it. After that, I decided I would go into something I figured was going to be very safe, and I was right. It was The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This book follows Kristen, whose boyfriend is deployed overseas at a location she can't know, and she's only able to contact him every few days. She is helping her friend plan her wedding. During this, she ends up meeting her best friend's fiance's best friend. These two end up becoming very good friends, and he helps her out in her business. Over time, she begins to fall for him, and eventually her and her boyfriend break up. But she decides that her and the other main character can't be in a relationship, and we follow along their journey of trying to figure out what their relationship means and how they can be together. I really loved this book. I found it extremely funny, and I think it's the kind of story that could turn into a really good movie, so let's pray for that. I felt like the characters were just very lovable and their situation was very understandable, but I like how Abby Jimenez wraps it all up at the end. It's not in a perfect bow, but they're able to have their happy ending in some way. In the end, I ended up rating this one 5 stars as well, of course. Next up was the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez, which is the next in this series. I won't go too in depth about the plot of this book because it hinges on a very major plot point in the previous book. While I loved the story and how it ended, I was a bit disappointed as I felt like this character didn't need a love story. If you've read the previous book, you might understand why I have this. I feel like it was a bit rushed isn't the right term, but I felt like it just felt forced in a way because of what happened in the previous book. Because of this, I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. The last book I've finished in this 6-month period is The Dry by Jane Harper. I don't have the book on me right now because I've actually lent it to a family friend. So instead, I listened to the audiobook while I was working last week. This book follows along Aaron Falk, who tries to figure out the death of his best friend and his friend's family. It's very dramatic and it hinges so much on things that happened in the past in this small rural town in Australia. If you're looking for a really good mystery, I highly recommend this. It has aspects of love, it has huge plot twists, and I just can't recommend this book enough. I will always rate it a 5 stars. I haven't finished these yet, but I do think I will finish them by the end of June. So I'm going to include them in this video. I am currently reading 2 books. One is Force of Nature by Jane Harper, the follow-up in the Aaron Falk series. I have read this before and I really, really love it. It's not as good as The Dry in my opinion, but it is very fun still and I am enjoying it. I wanted to reread this because on my July TBR is Exiles by Jane Harper, which is the 3rd book in this series. The other book I'm currently reading is Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. I am not too far into this one yet. I'm hoping to finish it tomorrow because I'm going to sit around today and tomorrow morning and read it. But I'm enjoying it a lot and I am excited to see how this one ends. So far, it just follows 2 people who randomly meet in a museum. One of the main characters volunteers there to do tours and they end up deciding that they're going to get 6 conversations together to try and figure each other out. And the concept is just so intriguing and I'm loving it. And that's it for our mid-year wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book that you've read so far this year is.